Be progressive!
We'll make him change.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for everything that you've done. And I pass the floor to Daniel Ray, who's a student at University of Ottawa, and like I said, he'll give us the voice
And
of
a walker with me.
Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Rael. Thanks, Ron. I'm actually floored, and I wish that, or I hope rather, that by the time I reach Ron's age, I'll still be able to do what he's done. Okay, who am I kidding? I can't walk like Ron today. And I hope by the time I reach Ron's age, I won't have to do that. At least not for this particular issue.
That'll be put to rest!
Let's hope so. I remember when I was up here 3 months ago, I think. Yeah, 3 months ago. At the National Day of Action, as thousands marched across this land to hold Trudeau to account. Believe it or not, that was the first time I'd interacted with Fair Vote Canada or Lead Now. I'd heard of them, but I didn't really know much about them. And I was only peripherally aware of the Council of Canadians. The rest of the alliance I hadn't even heard of.
That's okay, you had the heart at the right place!
But I cared about electoral reform. I cared, my classmates and my friends cared. And we cared enough to, with no prompting, start organizing a rally that fired off in full force within 2 weeks. The Daughters of the Vote, and I'd like to specifically thank Chelsea Montgomery, again, I believe with no prompting, brought the issue right from the youth to Mr. Trudeau as their first question. We have showed time and again that this issue is relevant, that this issue is current, and that this issue is not going away. We showed that this is a voting issue, assuming that Trudeau didn't know that already, and I would assume he knew. I mean, you don't repeat a promise over 1,600 times if nobody cares about it. In fact, I think that little blurb about organizing without belonging to many organizations actually describes a lot of my generation. A lot of us take as a point of pride that we don't belong to any party or organization, or that the only labels we accept are ones we make ourselves. Others simply don't have the time between work and school to make stable commitments to volunteer organizations like Fair Vote Canada. Many of us are more interested in local community activism than in dealing with a government which so many of us have decided or dismissed as irredeemably corrupt. And I'll get back to that point in a moment. So, however, we young people, we millennials, like many people I believe, have a couple little issues with our education and upbringing that draw us towards electoral reform and make many of us disgusted with the Prime Minister's decision to break his promise.
Disgusted!
And skeptical of those MPs who go along with him. I've narrowed it down to 3 major ones. 1, when we learned math, we were never told that sometimes 40% is a majority. We were told that a majority meant over 50%. So we keep getting surprised when in politics that turns out not to be the case. Number 2, we were told, and I know this is a radical idea, that breaking promises is wrong. And that when someone tells you they will do something and then doesn't, we should know better than to be fooled again.
Shame on you,
number 3, we learned that if someone in a position of authority tells us to do something immoral, like hurt someone or break a promise, and we do it, we do not get to wash our hands and say we were just doing as we were told. And that applies whether that authority is a sports coach, a boss, a religious leader, the head of a club, or even a political figure. Now, if we want future generations to accept the bizarre outcomes of First Past the Post and the equally bizarre excuses given by politicians who break their promises and then expect our votes, all of these lessons need to be removed from our curriculum, and parents need to be discouraged from teaching them at home. As it is, many in my generation and others are deeply attached to these lessons. And that makes us poor targets for platitudes. Another thing to note about young people, we swept Mr. Trudeau into office. Before 2015, the Liberals were near dead as a party.
That's right.
They were very near to the position the Progressive Conservatives were in a couple decades ago. If Mr. Trudeau thinks he magicked them back into natural governing party status, and they'll never face another harrowing decade, he'd best realize that many of us voted for him entirely because of the promise he made, which he has now abandoned.
That's right.
Now, there isn't, might I add, much room for centrism in a generation which was told on one hand that they were special and unique, and on the other that the world was a cold, hard place where they probably would not live as long, make as much, or do as well as their parents.
Don't expect anything.
Constructive centrism, which is ultimately the liberal doctrine, requires confidence and faith that the system can be improved via established processes and without rash action. Having the first Prime Minister we ever voted for turn his back on a promise to revitalize Canadian democracy, then act like it was no big deal and run a gish gallop of excuses? That is probably the best way to destroy that faith upon which the Liberal Party's future rests. Meanwhile, watching our MPs ignore their constituents again and again in favor of party leadership, apologizing, but not actually doing what is fully within their power to right the wrong.
Kick him out! Kick him out!
Well, I, for one, still have confidence in our democracy, if not in some of our representatives. Now, it's funny, a statement like, I can't trust my representatives, should be as bizarre as, I can't control the words my tongue are speaking. But instead, it's as familiar as, please pass the salt. But if Mr. Trudeau was worried about Kelly Leitch coming to power under PR, I have a newsflash for him. Disinterested, detached, self-interested, and cynical politics, not proportionality, is the breeding ground for reckless populism. Now, just to finish off, I would urge the Liberal MPs to listen to the generations which stand before them and the generations which will come after, and to stand for principles and optimism rather than cynical obedience. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to turn the mic over to Rael to introduce the rest of our lineup.
Well, you can see why I invited Daniel yet again. Daniel never ceases to impress me with his